Welcome to Voodoo Whiskey Gaming, and this is my late review of F.E.A.R. I play on the PC via Steam. It's also available on the Xbox Series, Xbox One, Xbox 360, and PS3. That being said, it is backwards compatible on the Xbox, but only if you have the disc. So let's jump into the story. You play as basically a nameless soldier in a unit called F.E.A.R, and I can't remember exactly what it stands for off the top of my head, but it's one of those things where it's like, we slapped together several words because we wanted it to spell out fear. That being said, you are some kind of like first response unit to weird stuff, and there's some weird stuff going on involving a psychic commander who has taken control of all of his psychic dummy guys, who are basically blank slate soldiers that he can control, but he can also do psychic weird shit as well. And then there's a spooky little girl who pops up every now and then. Does it all come together in the end? Yeah, it actually does pretty damn well. I think the story is pretty good. You've got to make sure you find the laptops because those laptops really matter. They give you a lot of the backstory, which helps fill out what's going on now. Voicemails will also help if you find those. All right, let's move on to the audio. The first thing I'm going to say is I think the voiceover work is really good in this game. I also think the music is good enough. I don't think it's anything that's really ever going to stand out. There's good music for when you're in the action-y sequences, and there's spooky noises less than music going on the rest of the time. Then you have the sound effects, which I think are good. I don't think they're phenomenal. It is an older game. The guns sound good enough, but they don't sound quite as good as we're used to now. The rest of the sound effects work well. I did have a couple of missing ones here or there. They do some good spooky sound effects throughout. But let's move on to the gameplay mechanics and whatnot. And as you may have caught on, there are some horror elements to this game, but it is mostly an FPS. But it's an FPS that does bullet time, and it actually does it very well. Which, since I'm addressing that right now, I think the bullet time in this game works really well. You can turn it on and off as you need. So in my case, I might be hiding behind cover, turn it on, pop out, blast a dude, pop back in and turn it off so that I can, let it recharge, then pop back out with more bullet time to do more damage to somebody else and get the drop on them. Which, speaking of getting the drop on enemies, I think that was actually a really cool element. Because if they don't see you, you can shoot one of them and it'll take fewer bullets than it would for the rest of them. But then you get some other cool stuff, like I kind of ambushed a group that was coming around a corner. I shot the first guy, and next thing you know, one guy behind him is like, oh, fuck! And then they all don't charge you. They actually go and take cover, which leads me into, I think the enemy AI is pretty solid. It's not phenomenal. It's not like absolutely mind-shattering. But if you take out one dude, the rest of the dudes aren't just going to charge you immediately. They're going to get behind cover. They're going to try and play it safe, which makes sense. But then they'll also yell out commands, which kind of gives you a clue, obviously. So if they say, hey, I'm going to go look, you know what's coming. But you don't have to just play fully cover shooter style. There are definitely moments where you can kick on that slow-mo and just go running in, guns blazing, and just trying to smoke all the dudes you can. With the variety of interesting weapons. You do have some kind of box standard weapons. You've got your pistol, you've got your MP5, then you've got your made-up assault rifle, you've got the weird, like, spike-throwing gun, the plasma gun that, like, vaporizes dudes, rocket launchers, and all sorts of other cool weapons. I mean, I guess there's not many more beyond that, but there are some cool weapons. They also give you a good assortment of grenades, which actually sounds kind of silly at first, but then you realize you can really use them in some great situations. You can lay traps with like the sticky grenades that are remote activated. You can throw out your own mines and lure them in. I think they did a really good job building a solid shooter where you can play in not necessarily too many different ways, but you can mix it up a little bit. Now, as I mentioned, it is also a horror game, and there are some good spooky bits. In between the firefights, that downtime, they land some good scares in there, and they do a good job building tension as well as with some storytelling. But then you have the controls, which I think worked well. I didn't have any real complaints with them. There is some strange mapping, but that kind of makes sense when you want to make the slow-mo really easy to use, so to take over something that might be more commonly placed. But overall, I felt that the controls worked well enough. I didn't find them so alien that I couldn't get into the game. But let's move on to the graphics and visuals, and the first thing I'm going to say is it's an old game and has not aged great. It's one of those games that was trying to look much more realistic at the time, and games like that just generally don't hold up as well over time. I will say they did some cool things with their weapon design. They made them unique. Not that they always made sense in how they functioned, but they looked cool and they had just some interesting elements going on. I did like the enemy designs and what was going on there. I also just generally liked the atmosphere that they built visually in the different areas you go to. Though they are pretty similar, all of the areas, you get a bit of difference here or there, but generally speaking, they're not super unique. There's a couple of levels that are more unique, but a lot of the game takes place in a lot of gray hallways and cement and all of that jazz. And while it does more or less fit with what's going on at the same time, they could have done a little bit more to mix that up. I do think the lighting was actually pretty good for back then. They did some good work with the shadows, not making it too dark that you can't see what's going on. I will say the spooky girl is a good spooky girl, little generic, but good spooky girls are generally kind of generic. But then I think one of the coolest things they did was obviously the bullet time and the effects there. You can really see how that plays out. You can see how much slower they are than you. And another cool thing I guess I didn't mention was how they'll react to that. They'll sit there and yell, "He's too fast," and stuff like that, which is always kind of fun when they add details like that. Now, having played this on PC, I do have to complain a little bit. It does not run great. You have to mess around with quite a few things to really get it to try and run more smoothly. It'll start at a solid 30 frames per second, but after about 15 to 20 minutes, you'll start to notice a drop, and then 5 to 10 minutes later, it's gonna just chug. And you have to save and back out and jump back in. So if you don't find it and get the settings tweaked the way they need to be tweaked, it's not a fun experience. It took me a minute. My understanding is it plays way better on the console, especially on the Xbox. It gets a frame rate boost. Now to get into the wrap up, overall, I still had fun with this. Having to fuck around with the settings so that I could actually play through it the way I would like to was a bit obnoxious, but that comes with some of these older games, playing them on newer PCs. So really, I don't have a problem recommending replaying this. I had a good time with it. If you're a visual snob, you're not gonna have a great time with this. But I think there's still a lot of fun to be had there, and the bullet time really worked well, and it actually holds up well today. Okay, so in the comments down below, why don't you tell me, who's your favorite spooky little girl in entertainment, movies, whatever? And as always, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please hit that like button. And if you like what I'm doing in general, share and subscribe. Have a good one.